The Dallas Cowboys have signed Leighton Vander Esch to a contract extension. What does that mean for Micah Parsons and the rest of the linebackers? All that and more on this episode of Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I'm at Marcus_Mosher on Twitter. He is at McCool BCB. Landon, let's start with this. The Cowboys have signed Leighton Vander Esch to a one-year deal. Your thoughts?
I will tell you this. I like the money. It's a very cheap deal.
Which we should bet 1 year, $3 million max, according to Todd Archer. Max.
Which is fantastic, and I think if you looked at the way Leighton was playing near the end of the season, it was much better football than we had seen at the beginning of the season, at the end of last year. I don't know if it's just more time away from some of the injury stuff that he was dealing with, or a level of comfort back in a system that he was more comfortable with, and just kind of getting into the use of that. But I think actually Leighton Vander Esch, was kind of underrated last year because we had all just basically written him off to a large degree, and had so much excitement around Micah Parsons. But I think if you look at what Leighton Vander Esch can do, and don't necessarily focus only on some of the negative aspects of his game, I think what you find is that they got a really good deal for a $3 million linebacker who can come in and at least plug the hole at linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
And then the upside there is that a guy like Jabril Cox comes back and steals that spot from Leighton Vander Esch. And $3 million is the amount of money that it doesn't prohibit something like that from happening.
No, all right. Let's first talk about the player before we get to the contract, because I actually have a lot of thoughts on the contract. But the first 2 months of the season for Vander Esch were bad. He just did not play well. I think the Broncos game was the first time that I thought he really started to look like his former self. And over the second half of the season, you saw it in spurts. Like, he had 3 or 4 games that were really good, and then he'd have a couple games that were really bad and some average games. I think his game in the wild card against the 49ers was a little bit overrated. He made a bunch of tackles, but he was okay. I think he's only 26 years old, but he's probably an average linebacker, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of what the contract seems to indicate as well. And I think that the thing there is, for the Cowboys, they know what they've got in Leighton Vander Esch, and that's kind of their MO in general of why they like to re-sign these guys, is that these are the guys they know the most about. So I would definitely call Leighton Vander Esch an average NFL linebacker at this point.
The thing is, if you look at the contract structure, and let's get into this. Let's say it's $2.5 million, which seems pretty likely. I'm guessing for him to earn a max of $3 million, he's got to stay healthy all 17 games. The Cowboys probably have to make playoffs. He maybe needs to make the Pro Bowl, but you're talking like special teams level money, like special team linebackers only. For example, Tyler Matakavich, who the Bills signed to be a core special teamer.
Yeah.
TJ Edwards, Nick Vigil, Landon Roberts. Chris Board. You're literally paying him to be like a special teams level linebacker, which to me says a couple things. Number one, it's a great value if he plays 8 or more games this year, right? Yeah. Number two, it doesn't prevent them from doing something else in free agency or drafting a linebacker high. Number three, I don't think we should automatically assume that his spot on the roster is a lock. If it's only $2.5 million, and he comes into training camp and he doesn't look great, you can move on. It's not going to hurt you in any way.
This is a floor signing, right?
Yep.
This is a signing to create a comfortable floor for the linebacker room. We've got Leighton here. Can we improve on the position? Potentially, through the draft or through free agency, maybe. But I think, at the very minimum right now, you've got Leighton Vander Esch there. And it's I would say a better than normal signing for the Cowboys of
Yep.
in this kind of realm of, hey, we're trying to plug holes before the draft, right? Like, I think
This
for
is
what
better than what they usually do, right?
yeah, this is a solid option that you could see being a solution if going into the season, with the opportunity, obviously, in the draft to maybe draft some guys that could potentially take a spot, or draft some guys who could develop underneath him and be ready for 2023 when he's done.
I got a sneaky suspicion, though, that this isn't going to be the only linebacker they sign, right? They almost have to go out and get somebody else that can play right away, just in case Jabril Cox isn't ready to go, right?
I think I agree with that, because I think that would be one of their strategies for trying to solve the edge situation a little bit better, right? Is like, look, if we create more depth at the linebacker positions to the point where we feel comfortable with the other linebackers that are not named Micah Parsons, that means that we can use Micah Parsons more as a solution to our edge equation, which again, I think at this point, what we've seen, they still have money to go out and sign one more big guy, and whether that could be, we've hypothesized it could be a Bobby Wagner with the idea of moving Parsons down to play more rush end, or a defensive end with the idea of being able to keep Parsons in both spots really well.
Right.
I think a lot of this is going to depend on which route they decide to go with this money, right? If they decide to go get another linebacker, then I would imagine that we're not going to see another kind of high profile defensive end type. I think what we'll do is they'll ride with the guys they have. They'll probably draft a guy, and then they'll use the combination of Dorrance Armstrong, Golston, Micah Parsons to kind of cobble together what you need at the right defensive end position.
I wouldn't be opposed to one more linebacker in free agency on a 1 or 2 year deal. And there's names out there. I mean, we've gone over the names a million times. Bobby Wagner's obviously the biggest one. I don't think that's probably going to get done. But if you want to go out and get a Kazir White, a guy that can play the weak side linebacker, and you can let Leighton play the middle, that would make sense. And if you want to go out and get somebody who knows the scheme well, like a KJ Wright, who can play multiple different positions and maybe kind of helps somebody like Jabril Cox, I think that makes sense as well. But it does feel likely they're going to grab somebody else. And that way they can let the draft kind of come to them, because I think they want to draft a linebacker sometime on day 2. But I don't think they want to have to necessarily be forced to pick one if they don't. I mean, if the board doesn't line up that way.
Yeah, and they certainly don't want to be pigeonholed to having to use Parsons at linebacker because they couldn't draft a starter level linebacker out of the gate in this draft. So I agree that they're definitely going to want to add more linebackers, probably through both free agency and the draft. I think the key is that they don't want to be forced to have to bring another starter in order, be forced to have to hit on another starter in order to be able to play Parsons, kind of fluidly between defensive end and linebacker.
And there are a million names out there still in free agency, and they could wait till April 1st or 2 weeks before the draft, and there's going to be quality guys out there. So they're not in a rush at all to go out and find that guy. So if they don't sign anybody this weekend or next week, don't worry. They're going to be okay at linebacker. All right, let's take a quick break, and let's before we talk about Dorrance Armstrong, the other guy the Cowboys signed, to tell you guys about Bet Online. It's that time of year again, as college basketball tournament season is finally upon us. From all of the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, the Cowboys made another deal official yesterday by signing defensive end Dorrance Armstrong. We talked about this yesterday in the show. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the numbers. 2 years, $13 million. Feels a little high to me, but what do you think?
I think it's a little bit more than I expected, but I also think that this is an ascending player. I mean, I have a lot of faith in Dorrance Armstrong because, you've watched him develop. He came into the league very young. He played at Kansas, where he was basically the only player worth a darn on his football team for a while. And I think, it's a lot like you're hearing a lot of the same criticism with Dorrance Armstrong that you hear with Schultz, which is, well, he didn't produce a lot early on. Well, I mean, he was stuck behind quite a few people this first few years, as Schultz was as well. So I think what you're seeing now is a guy coming into his own. He's rebuilt his body. I mean, if you could look at him physically where he is now versus where he was even last year or 2 years ago, he looks like a completely different player. So he came out and produced at a level that I would say is surprising, but it's not surprising if you've been watching him in training camp these last few years. I think, if anything, what's surprising is that it finally happened, right? Because I think that I've been through 2 seasons of pumping up Dorrance Armstrong in the training camp situation, and only to have it kind of fizzle out when it came to the regular season. I think this year you saw Dorrance Armstrong making plays on defense, not just on special teams, but being a playmaker and being difficult to block at different times as a defender. So I think that there's been some talk about, he'll be a good rotational guy with some of the other guys, Basham and some of the other guys they have. I mean, I think as of right now, until they sign somebody else, Dorrance Armstrong is your starter.
Well, and I was going to say, just based off salary alone, $6.5 million is usually a starting level player.
I think he is the starter. Yeah. I mean, unless they bring in somebody else to kind of compete with him or a top end guy. I think the plan right now is to use Dorrance Armstrong as the starter at the position with the heavy rotation, obviously including Micah Parsons in pass rush situations. So I understand it's a little bit scary there because, he's not necessarily proven as a starter, but if you go back and look at, his production over the last season, he consistently produced when he was giving opportunities. It may have been up and down sometimes, but he was able to, he had several games where he had, I think it was like 3 or more games of 8 or more pressures last year. You said yesterday. I mean, there is a lot of production that he made last year in a tight and crowded defensive end room. And if you look at it, I think he had 2 less pass rushing snaps than Randy Gregory did last year. And he ended up with 1 less sack. So, Gregory has more talent there. I'm not trying to deny that, but I think what I'm pointing out is that Armstrong was able to produce at a level that was pretty similar to Gregory on similar number of pass rush snaps.
I think it's probably a slight overpay, but nothing to get upset about, especially when the Cowboys have so much cap space, right? It's not a big deal at all.
If he breaks out, it becomes a huge deal, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
If he breaks out, it becomes an absolute
steal. Well, and I'll be honest, if he just plays the way that he did last year, it's a fine deal. What the Cowboys really need, though, is they really need Golston to take the next step and basically replace Dorrance Armstrong as the 3rd defensive end, right? Because I think Armstrong probably could work his way up to being an average level starter. I don't know if he's there yet, but I think he could eventually get there. What they need is somebody else that when Armstrong and Lawrence aren't on the field, the drop in play isn't significant. And I felt like sometimes last year with Golston, it was. I maybe not as high on Golston's rookie year as other people are, but I'm curious to see how he develops in year 2.
Absolutely. And I think you throw in Basham there as well. I mean, he's another guy that's just another body who can give you something. So I think everybody
is a fine 4th edge, right? That's just what he is at this point of his career. All right. Really quickly, before we move on to some of the other news, I thought it was really interesting today, looking at the Cowboys 2018 draft, that they've now signed 4 of the top 5 picks, and that includes Leighton Vander Esch. They did not sign Connor Williams, who all of us were so excited about when they drafted him at pick 50. They signed Michael Gallup to a contract extension. They signed Dalton Schultz to a contract extension, and Dorrance Armstrong. They also got Cedric Wilson in that draft, so not too bad. Kind of looking back at it now, it always takes 3 or 4 years to judge a draft class, but how do you feel about that class?
It's, obviously a pretty decent class. I mean, I think that Leighton Vander Esch had an incredible rookie season, and then after that, dealt with some injury issues. Really, his play really fell off, and now he's kind of finding his balance in there between between the 2 Cowboys' thoughts on him, that he's incredible and that he's terrible. He's somewhere in between, and they're finding that. And look, he signed a very cheap deal with the Cowboys. I think that's a reflection on the fact that you saw more bad play than you saw good play overall from him. But I think that, again, we saw that as he got further away from some of the injury stuff, he started to play better football. So I think that there's some value there. Should he have been the first round pick? I think it's hard to kind of argue that because a lot of the stuff that happened to him, was injury related down the road.
Yeah.
Could they have anticipated that? Maybe, but it's hard to blame them as a bad pick there when he showed you so much talent his rookie year, right?
But we did know about the neck injuries kind of going into the draft, right? And that's the part of it. Now, if you want to be really nice to the Cowboys, you could say some of the picks after them weren't great anyways, between
That's
Billy
true.
Price, Rashaan Evans, Isaiah Wynn, DJ Moore, good players. Hayden Hurst, now he's on his third team. By the way, I like the deal that Hayden Hurst got with the Bengals. I think 1 year, $3 million. I would have done that. A lot of the options weren't great. And at least we know when Vander Esch was healthy, he's a good player. It's just, and this is a lesson the Cowboys probably should learn. Linebackers, specifically pure off the ball linebackers in anywhere in the first round, are typically not a good value.
It's tough. I honestly, like everybody that talks about linebacker, it's not as cut and dry as, something like running back, right? I think that,
they're more important to your team than running. Let me rephrase that.
Oh, wow.
Let me rephrase that. Linebacker, when you have a good linebacker on your team, it can really be valuable. And it's really hard to play good defense without linebackers, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But paying those guys is usually not a winning strategy because they just don't last very long like a running back does. And the difference between the running back and the linebacker market is there's a million running backs out there that can play. There's only a handful of linebackers that are good and weapons to your defense right now.
Yeah, and that's why it's very difficult evaluation, right? Because, more not so much the evaluation, but the valuation of the position, right? Because you need good linebackers to be good on defense. Where would you get the best linebackers? The first round. But sometimes by doing so, you're overpaying, and if they bust hard.
But recently,
so it really hurts.
like the second round has kind of been the range, right? The Fred Warner was there, Bobby Wagner, Deion Jones. Like you can get a lot of really good linebackers in the second day of the draft. I kind of feel like that's just where you should be targeting now. And you look at this upcoming draft class, Landon, like it's full of day two linebackers. And as much as I love Kobe Dean and you like Devin Lloyd, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to take those guys in round one when pick your favorite day two linebacker could be there at 56.
Oh yeah, like honestly, I would prefer not to take Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean at 24 at this point. I just think that the value, there's going to be so many more other players that are more valuable to the Cowboys at 24. I think when they come up for their pick, so I think that's fair, and I think it's you look at the way that linebackers are being used, it's kind of all over the place, a whole bunch of different body types. It makes the market really difficult. Sure. Again, I think it's good to have a bunch of them. And I think the Cowboys thought that they had a lot of good depth at the position last season. And that kind of evaporated very quickly. So
just to kind of tie a bow on our 2018 draft class thoughts, you get 4 guys that are still on your team after the rookie contracts. It typically means the draft's pretty good. Obviously, we know the Cowboys like to keep their draft picks, so maybe that's influencing it as well. But Connor Williams and Michael Gallup both got pretty decent contracts in free agency. The Cowboys are going to get back comp picks for each of those guys. So 2018 draft keeps paying dividends for the Cowboys. And then you also have Mike White, who threw for 400 yards in a game, like the first guy in forever for the Jets to do that. So franchise quarterback also on a draft is pretty good.
Yeah, it was a pretty good – listen, The Cowboys fans have a ton to be upset about with the way that the Cowboys handle their contracts. Like, there's obviously very little argument to be made about that.
Yeah,
I think the Cowboys fans should be thrilled with the way that this team drafts. We're one of the best teams in all of the NFL when it comes to identifying talent.
Their scouting department over the last 5 or 6 years has done really well at keeping them competitive. And even in years where they've missed in the first round, they've generally done a pretty good job of at least getting 2 or 3 guys that can contribute. Now, the 2019 class might be the only one that doesn't, with Tony Pollard being the only noteworthy guy there. But for the most part, they're good.
2019 class was just in general not a great
Wow.
class. I mean, top T to B, top to bottom in the NFL.
Go look at a team and you tell me who had a good 2019 class, because it's
Get
not
right back
happening.
to us.
Yeah, it's not happening. All right, let's take one more break to tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has already given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. And it's because Built Bars are just the absolute best tasting protein bar out there right now. They even taste better than your typical candy bar. And they're healthier. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your favorite candy bar, which usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. They've got so many great flavors, including mint brownie, coconut almond. And the new flavor this month is white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and they've got new flavors coming out all the time. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, a couple more Cowboys-related news things we need to talk about. First, J-Ron Curse. We heard about a week ago that the Cowboys were close to a deal with J-Ron Curse, and all of a sudden, it seems like they're not close. So we've got no new news. What do you think is going on there?
I think it's a very difficult contract, to be honest. I don't know, what the model is. People keep talking like he's a safety, and he is, but the way he plays the position is very different than a lot of other safeties, and yes. I think that's affecting his valuation, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's become a difficult contract negotiation, because Curse is trying to get paid, and as he should. This is his first real opportunity since being in the league to put together some really great a whole season of really great tape. And he's up for a contract. So this is his first chance to take a nice bite at the apple and get, life-changing money. So he's going to make an argument that he deserves to be paid, X amount of money. And for the Cowboys, they're going to look at the situation, go, you're a safety really in name only. You mostly playing linebacker. There may be some dispute between the agent and the team as to what that valuation would mean because of the kind of way that he plays. So I think because of that, the contract situation is a little more difficult. Mm-hmm. Obviously, as we've seen, the Cowboys have had problems with kind of underpricing folks in some of these deals. So they may be well far off, but that doesn't mean that they aren't necessarily trying to work hard to get closer and closer to a deal, because I think that Curse wants to stay here, and I think the Cowboys want to keep him. It's just about figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, I think obviously the Cowboys want to keep him, and I think Curse wants to be here. But the problem is the safety market has been weird this year. For example, Marcus May, who was just a better player, signed a long-term deal with the Saints at $7 million per year. And that kind of set the cap of the non-Pro Bowl level safeties, right? Because Marcus Williams was always going to get more because he's young and he's been an all-pro. And now we're waiting on guys like Tyrann Mathieu. What does Tyrann Mathieu get? Who knows? Quandre Diggs, who had a Pro Bowl year last year for the Seahawks, got $6 million a season. Terrell Edmonds for the Steelers, who has started every single game, was a first-round pick. He's 25 years old, and he's sitting out there without a contract. It seems like we just have a lot of dominoes still to go. We've got Anthony Harris that's out there, Jabril Peppers, Tashawn Gibson, who played a bunch of snaps last year. Xavier Woods, who played almost every snap for the Vikings last year, signed a $1.7 million deal with Carolina. So it feels like it's going to come in somewhere between 3 and 5 million, but the Cowboys and Curse are probably just waiting to see what does the rest of the safety market look like before we do it.
I mean, frankly, look at the list of names that you just listed. Those are all incredibly different types of athletes who all play an incredibly different brand of safety. So, this is just a huge mess to try to sort through. We're not going to pay him like Marcus May because Curse doesn't cover like Marcus May. But at the same time, Marcus May is not nearly the run player that Curse is. It's so trying to kind of triangulate value in this market. And then on top of the fact, like we said, Curse himself also plays the position in a very unique manner. Mm-hmm. It becomes very difficult math. And I can understand why the deal is taking on. And I also would caution, I think, in suggesting, and not that you have or anyone has necessarily, but I would caution against the idea that because the deal hasn't happened yet, that there is like a strong disagreement between the two camps. What could be happening is that they are literally waiting for a couple more deals to be signed to kind of be sort of guideposts for both sides.
I agree.
I think that that's perfectly reasonable. There's no reason to I can understand why Cowboys fans feel this way, but there's no reason to automatically assume that just because deals aren't done right away or that it's taking a little bit of time, that it's a contentious situation. It may be that both of these sides are waiting for more guidance on what the market is going to say a safety is worth.
I just kind of in my head tallied the safeties that are out there, and there's at least 15 starting safeties that have yet to sign a contract yet.
Yeah, and again,
I mean, it's a lot, right?
There's no rush here,
No.
I mean, because there's that many safeties, and because I think that the other thing to consider here is that I don't know if the Cowboys are interested in doing this, but I think that there's going to be some interesting choices for them at 24, maybe even at 56, if they want to go the safety route in the draft. So, like Dax Hill or Brisker, or any of these guys, like
the other thing the Cowboys have in their back pocket is they have Malik Hooker and they have Donovan Wilson already under contract. So like they could tell Curse, hey, we loved having you last year, but we've got somebody that kind of does the same stuff that you do. If you're not going to take our deal, that's fine. We'll just go pay Casey. We'll have our 3 safeties again. It's not a big deal. Like, I don't know. I think they'll eventually get it done. My guess is
I do too.
I think it's going to be a 3-year, $15-ish million deal, something like that. They're just haggling over that extra $1 million.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Not a big deal to me.
I think there's no deadline here,
No,
so they've got plenty of time to do this. And if both sides are truly interested, they can take the time to make sure that there's a deal that's equitable for both sides.
And listen, if the worst case scenario happens here with the Cowboys where Curse doesn't want to be here, I love J. Curse. I think he was great for the Cowboys last year. You can find guys to do that role. You can. The Cowboys found J. Curse last year at about this same time in free agency, right?
Exactly.
Go get Terrell Edmonds, a former first-round pick who's super athletic, or go get somebody else like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong here. Cowboys Nation's going to be all upset, but I think
that's possible too. But I agree. I think that they'll be okay there.
Last thing before we head out, Zadarius Smith backed out of his 4-year, $35 million deal with the Ravens. I did hear that the Cowboys checked in on the medicals. They're fine with the medicals there. It's just more about the contract. Obviously, I think the Cowboys would do 4 for $35 in a heartbeat. But my guess is that Darius backed out of the deal after seeing Chandler Jones and Von Miller get huge deals. So what would you be comfortable giving Zadarius Smith?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, it's that I said too, right? When he backed out and the Cowboys are suddenly interested, I was like, if he backed out of that deal because he saw the deals that Vaughn and everyone was getting, why do we think that we're going to be competitive in his new market? Unless the Cowboys
could they middle a little bit
desperate.
Though? Could they middle? Okay, so basically he got $9 million a year from the Ravens, essentially. Vaughn got $17.5 million a year. Could you give him $13 million a year, or give him the Gregory deal, $14 million a year?
I mean, I would say that that's certainly what I would think about doing, is giving him the same deal, offering him the same deal that Gregory had. And
would you be comfortable with that?
If they're comfortable with the actual medical aspect of it, then I guess I am. I don't feel strongly about the player. I think he was really good for Green Bay. I thought he played better for Green Bay than I expected him to when he got signed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can anticipate that level of surprise again with the Cowboys when he signs with them. I don't know that he's exactly the best fit for what they're looking to do. It
doesn't feel like a right end for Dan Quinn.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, he's more of a left end for sure. And if anything, I mean, I haven't checked, but he seems like an inside-outside guy. Like, you could probably bump him in and have him rush inside. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about directly what we're looking for right now, which is a right defensive end, this doesn't necessarily seem like the best fit for that. This would be a better fit if they had signed Randy Gregory and let DeMarcus Lawrence go.
I agree.
Yeah.
Now, I trust Dan Quinn. Like he'd figure it out, right? And that's ultimately what gives me a lot of confidence that the Cowboys defense is going to be good. Is he's not just gonna put Zadarius Smith on the right side and say, okay, go be Randy Gregory, when that's not really his skill set, right? He'll find ways to slant these guys and to get him matched up one-on-one against guards and stuff. And is it the perfect fit? No. But a good defensive coordinator can make all these kind of parts match. And I think they'd be okay if they did it.
Yeah, I think what we've seen from this coordinator that Quinn is that he's able to take these talents and find ways to kind of fit them onto the field in a way that makes sense, right? And like taking the talent at the defensive pass rusher position and then in the interior guys, and then mix and matching them in different gaps to kind of create all kinds of different mismatches. So I think it would be helpful to kind of get another one of those kind of right defensive end type skill sets, just so you have a balance there. But I certainly have faith in Quinn to find a way to very helpfully use a player like Zadarius Smith if he signs.
Yeah, I mean, he's familiar with these 270-pound defensive ends before. He did it at Atlanta when he had Derek Shelby, who was 280, and the Seahawks did stuff like this before where they had big defensive ends and he'd figure it out. Is it worth that much money? That's debatable, but Dan Quinn would figure it out. Hopefully we'll get some news about a pass rusher over the weekend. Maybe we'll get some Zadarius Smith stuff. I don't anticipate Jadeveon Clowney signing anytime soon. If we've seen the Jadeveon Clowney thing, it's basically he's going to show up in July, so he doesn't have to do all the off-season stuff, which is fine. Listen, I get it. He's a big skier, so it's what he likes to do at this time of year.
Really? Ski? I mean, that's not to get off on a tangent, but man, that seems like the kind of thing that would be prohibited in most NFL contracts. But
that's why he hasn't signed with certain teams. Is because
maybe so.
So,
I guess so.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow the show at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we'll see you next time.